I have a confession to make. I hate hustle content. And I know, this is not a controversial opinion. But you know what? I had to delve into hustle content for this video and god damn it. These people are another species. I can't remember the name of the psychoanalyst who said that men are obsessed with pleasing other men in an almost romantic type of way, but I feel like there is no better place to see that than in hustle bro culture. People like Andrew Tate, Anthony Robbins, and just hustle bros in general constantly flex their cars, their trophy wife or girlfriend, their properties, their fit bodies to who? Women? No, to other men. You are allowed not to believe in this theory, but you gotta admit, there is something going on. Anyway, today I'm particularly interested in landlords. On the internet, they play real-life Monopoly, they buy more and more houses to generate more and more passive income. Obviously, they get criticized a lot, but I've noticed something and I wanted to share it with you. Most of the criticism I see is focused on the morality of the landlord. This landlord is evil, that landlord is a bad person, and I think it's fair. I mean, don't get me wrong, I can't stand those guys either. Actually, let me show you one TikTok that really triggered me to the point that my eyes started to hurt because I was rolling them so much. The guy is Tom Cruise, he has more than 600 rental units, and here he reacted to another despicable landlord comments on his purchase of a boat.
It's a $3 million yacht, even if you got it at a discount. I think Tom Cruise is a smart guy, but I think he likes to flex too much.
Y'all think I flex too much? I don't think so.
This guy's got a scarcity mindset. That's why.
Just the fact that he says scarcity mindset, talking to a person, because this guy, we're going to talk about him later, but this other guy at the very beginning, he has multiple houses, multiple properties. Notice that in each shot he has a different car in the background.
All the Porsches and all the Lamborghinis.
It's just so lame and so childish. I just can't. I like to look at the comments. Oh yeah, everybody's commenting on the fact that he's shot with different cars in the background. It's like, yeah bro, what, different car, come on. You're so rich, bro. I don't know about you guys, but now whenever I see a guy with like an expensive car or someone bragging about having a bunch of cars, I can't help but think about Greta Street. Anyway, that's not the direction this video was supposed to take, so let's refocus. As I was saying, the criticism tends to focus on the excessive character of certain landlords and ultimately reduces the problem to the immorality of the landlord. But by stopping there, you assume that there are good versus bad landlords, that a middle-class, middle-aged couple investing into a second home after a lifelong of work is fair, but that an internet weirdo like Tom Cruise owning more than 600 units is not fair. What if both were unfair? What I mean is that it is deeply ingrained in people's minds that it is legitimate to grow one's capital through owning properties. In fact, many people invest with the goal of, anticipating retirement, to make sure they'll receive passive income when they retire. But why housing? Why is housing a commodity to be traded? The first thing to know, and that can be reassuring in a way, is that it hasn't always been like that. The system of private renting that we're now super familiar with has not always been as natural as it seems. I'm going to use the example of the UK for this part, but it is very much applicable to other industrialized countries. Social housing in the UK stretches back to the late 19th century, but it wasn't until the 1919 Housing and Town Planning Act that the government embarked on the first comprehensive plan to build social housing. Led by councils, this was the foundation of a large-scale program of building that stretched all the way through to the latter half of the 20th century. It's after the Second World War that things accelerated because the government was faced with the persistent problem of private rented slums, the destruction of war, and the need to house returning soldiers. Post-war governments of differing parties carried out programs of social house building that provided the stability of long-term tenancies at low rents to millions of ordinary people. Now listen to this. In the 3.5 decades after the end of World War II, local authorities and housing associations built 4.4 million social homes. That is an insane number. However, that did not last too long because a well-known conservative woman entered the political scene and kind of turned things upside down. Thatcher wanted to turn the UK into a nation of homeowners. Ditch council housing, the government would now support first-time buyers. Through thrift and hard work, when the theory, ordinary families should be able to buy their own homes. It would give them security and dignity and freedom and liberate them from the nannying of local council landlords. It was also believed that it would make them better citizens with their own stake in the economic well-being of the country and that they would have an incentive to contribute to national prosperity. So there are two things happening at the same time. First, self-reliant, hard-working families get to buy their house. And second, the fact that they own a house nurtures those values of self-reliance, etc.
To sell a working man his own home makes him that much more conservative and much less socialist.
That was in the late 1970s, we're in 2023, and it's clear that the neoliberal cult of self-reliance is alive and kicking, despite being a myth from the very beginning. When Thatcher talks about rewarding hard-working families, she speaks to her electorate, the middle and upper classes, for whom the dream of home ownership can become a reality. But I'm sure you know people who've been working their asses off their entire life and still cannot afford a home. Actually, the fact that I'm bringing this argument is interesting because it still implies that hard work should be a condition to have a home. So my anti-neoliberalism critique is somehow neoliberal. No, housing is a basic human right, not something that needs to be earned. Going back to the TikToks, the empirical evidence, we see how people are obsessed with private property. Look at this one, for example, and let's assume it is not staged.
My yard. You park it in my yard. I can't see who's in there. Why are you parked? I don't need to handle.
I hope you agree with me that this is completely nonsensical. There's also this video of him going to one of his private properties to get rid of some homeless people who went in there.
At my property. More than likely these bikes are stolen. So what we do is we render them useless and so we throw them out in the back.
And the comment section is full of people being like, I have my own method to get rid of squatters, blah blah blah. My feminism is gonna show, but when I see those comment sections and I see how people talk about their own properties and like how they defend their own property with violence, etc. And those guys also end up in my comment sections to say that, I don't know, women shouldn't have rights, that they are just the property of men. And so when I see what those men are capable of doing to protect or keep their property, it really scares me. These people, of course, are extremists, but, you know, we're all a little bit obsessed with private property. I mean, look how often neighbors get angry at each other for the stupidest thing ever, to the point of going to courts and whatnot. I mean, it's not surprising in a way. In a society that glorifies private property, you want to hold on to what you possess as much as you can, because your value as an individual depends on those possessions. Now, obviously, neoliberalism is not as hot and trendy as it used to be. Younger generations are more critical of it because they deeply suffer from it. Breaking news, the dream of home ownership is pretty much dead. The proportion of people owning their own homes has been falling. People are becoming more and more dependent on landlords, and they have never hated them so much. Not all landlords, though. They will say, being a landlord is a tough job, I hear. I mean, it is true that landlords do provide a service. They put houses or flats on the market, they take care of them, they renovate them. At least they are legally obliged to do so. So technically they are doing a service to the state by, you know, doing the job of putting people into houses and flats. The problem, and it's the same problem as with wealthy entrepreneurs, is that there is a discrepancy between the value they produce and the money they receive for it. Landlords know it. I assume that's why they get triggered so easily when people criticize them, and maybe also the reason why they tend to twist things in their favor. I was struck about the number of times landlords completely twisted reality to make it appear as if they were producing more value than they really are. I'll give you one example. This lady called Tat Londoner, she said in her video, I renovated 2 units, I renovated the kitchen, I replaced the floor, and I painted the walls, and I included fantastic appliances. The only thing I believe she really did was the last bit, going to the bank and refinancing the building. The wording here is important because it transfers subjectivity from the workers to the landlord. Well, I'm doing this, I'm not a landlord. The way Tat says, I built this and I built that is very similar in a way to when people say that Elon Musk built SpaceX so that he built Tesla. We have to reverse that paradigm. Value is not created by the few people who invest, it is created by the many people who produce, the computer scientist, the engineers, the mason, the plumber, etc. So no, Tat did not do much here. She spotted that property, she saw what she could do with it, she went to the bank, got a mortgage, and asked other people to renovate the place so that she could put some tenants in there and get passive income from them. Actually, given the scale of her business, I wonder if she did not outsource even those very last tasks. Sure, workers are dependent on people like Tat to give them work, but at the same time, Tat is just as dependent on workers and government policies and public infrastructures. She is not a genius. She's taken advantage of a deregulated system and still want to be perceived as ethical.
All I have to do is take on their mortgage and pay the taxes. Big disclaimer, I only use this strategy for vacant properties because I do not think it's ethical to throw someone out of their home.
That's really interesting to me. That feels like what she does is ethical, implying that there is a non-ethical way to do it. The Tolkien's way, I assume. But again, to connect to what we said at the beginning, are there really two groups of landlords, the good and the bad? I find it interesting that there are more and more services that offer to do the dirty work for you. By dirty work, I mean dealing with the tenants, evicting them eventually. Finance bro Graham Stephan, who monetized the story of an eviction he had to deal with, now relies on a property manager apparently. Even as a medium-income individual, you can invest in real estate businesses that allocate your money in various rental units. The investment is so disconnected from what is being invested in that we cannot use phrases like adding value or creating value, or even investment actually. I'm going to be very annoying and go back to the etymology for a second, but investing means putting the official robe of an office to take on a role. So when you invest in, let's say, my Patreon, for example, you take on the role of being a Patreon. You support the work I do. You didn't see that self-promo comment, didn't you? What I criticize here isn't the idea of investing investment. I personally want to be able to invest time and money in causes that matter to me. What I criticize here is the complete disconnect between the investor and what is being invested in, which led us to the situation we are in today, meaning that we have hundreds of uninhabited Airbnbs and houses and millions of homeless people in the streets. Because of that disconnect, nobody can be made responsible. Tat did not cause the homelessness crisis, no. She only upgraded the house she bought to increase the rent. Middle-class Frank did not cause gentrification. He only put his savings into this rental business that builds student accommodations in low-income areas. It really does not matter if you're Tat or Frank. The system that allows to turn housing into an impersonal commodity isn't fair. We have commodified a basic human need by attaching a sort of mythical narrative to it, the dream of home ownership, meritocracy, all those things. Value can only be brought by the people who are attached to the place they choose to spend their life in. If we care enough to give them access to decent, energy-efficient housing, they will care enough to make it a valuable place. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, the conversation continues in the comment section. Don't forget to like, to subscribe, if it's not already done. I would like to thank my patrons for their support, and a special thank to top tier patrons: Donage, Ren, Alex, Benjamin, Oswald, Sam, Manuel, Dakota, Jay, Carla, and Perry. Other than that, I'll see you very soon, and yeah, salut!